Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck was a force to be reckoned with in Hollywood's golden age, commanding the screen in classics like Double Indemnity and Stella Dallas. But by the mid-1960s, the film roles were slowing down, and television, once seen as a step down from movie stars, was calling. Initially hesitant, Stanwyck took a gamble on The Big Valley in 1965, stepping into the role of Victoria Barkley, a tough-as-nails matriarch holding her family together in the rugged Old West. The role redefined her career, proving she wasn't just a film star. She was a powerhouse, no matter the medium. Her commanding presence and undeniable talent earned her an Emmy, silencing any doubts that a film legend could dominate the small screen. When The Big Valley wrapped in 1969, Stanwyck didn't retreat. She doubled down on television, taking on roles in hit miniseries like The Thornbirds and Dynasty. Unlike some of her contemporaries who struggled with the transition, she embraced it, cementing her legacy as one of the few golden age icons to thrive in both film and TV. Fred MacMurray. Fred MacMurray was the ultimate leading man of the 1940s, effortlessly shifting between charming romantic comedies and dark, brooding noir. His role in Double Indemnity cemented him as a Hollywood powerhouse, proving he could play both the affable everyman and the morally compromised antihero. But by the early 1960s, MacMurray made a move that stunned Hollywood. He transitioned to television. At a time when TV was often seen as a step down from movie stars, MacMurray defied expectations by headlining My Three Sons, a wholesome family sitcom that would define his legacy for an entirely new generation. The show, which debuted in 1960, followed widowed father Steve Douglas as he raised his three boys with the help of their grandfather and later Uncle Charlie. It was a massive hit, running for an impressive 12 seasons. MacMurray's Hollywood clout gave him an unheard-of contract perk. He filmed all his scenes in quick succession, allowing him to maintain a lucrative film career on the side. Though he occasionally returned to the big screen, My Three Sons became his signature role, transforming him from a noir anti-hero into America's favorite dad. His transition wasn't just successful, it was revolutionary, proving that a golden age film star could dominate the small screen without losing an ounce of star power. Loretta Young. At the height of her fame, Loretta Young was the epitome of Hollywood glamour. She dazzled audiences in the 1930s and 1940s, winning an Academy Award for The Farmer's Daughter in the late 1940s. But in the early 1950s, she made a move that stunned the industry. She left the silver screen behind to conquer television. In 1953, she launched The Loretta Young Show, an anthology drama series that not only showcased her acting range, but also cemented her as a TV pioneer. Each episode opened with Young's now iconic entrance, twirling into frame in an elegant gown, a signature move that became synonymous with the show's sophistication. It wasn't just a gimmick, it was a statement. She was proving that television could be just as glamorous as film, and audiences agreed. The show ran for 8 years and earned her 3 Emmy Awards. While many of her contemporaries struggled with the transition, Young embraced the new medium, curating stories that ranged from heartfelt dramas to socially conscious narratives. After retiring from acting in the 1960s, she made a brief but notable return in the 1980s with a TV movie, proving that even after decades away, her star power hadn't dimmed. Raymond Burr. Before he became one of television's most iconic legal minds, Raymond Burr was Hollywood's go-to villain. Towering and intense, he made a chilling impression as the sinister Lars Thorwald in Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, and spent much of the 1940s and early 1950s playing heavies in noir thrillers. But in 1957, Burr flipped the script. He auditioned for Perry Mason, expecting to land the role of the prosecutor Hamilton Berger. Instead, producers saw something in him. An authoritative presence, a deep voice that commanded attention, and a quiet intensity that made him perfect for the titular defense attorney. The gamble paid off. Perry Mason ran for 9 seasons, turning Burr into a television legend and redefining his career. When the series ended in 1966, Burr could have faded into typecasting or obscurity. Instead, he reinvented himself once again, taking on the role of Robert T. Ironside, a brilliant detective left paralyzed by an assassination attempt. Ironside was groundbreaking, not just for its portrayal of a paraplegic lead character, but for how it showcased Burr's range. The show ran for 8 seasons, proving that his TV dominance wasn't a fluke. Though his film career never regained its former momentum, Burr embraced his television legacy, reprising Perry Mason in a string of successful TV movies until his death in 1993. His transition from film villain to television hero wasn't just a career pivot, it was a masterclass in reinvention. Donna Reed. Donna Reed may have been a Hollywood sweetheart, but she was also a powerhouse behind the scenes. After winning an Academy Award for her role in From Here to Eternity in the early 1950s, Reed made a bold move. She took control of her own narrative by transitioning to television. In 1958, she launched The Donna Reed Show, a sitcom that presented the idyllic American family, with Reed herself at the center as the perfect housewife, Donna Stone. But unlike many actresses of the era, Reed wasn't just the star, she was the producer, wielding creative control over the series and shaping its wholesome, family-friendly image. This was a rarity at the time, especially for women in Hollywood. The show ran for 8 successful seasons, cementing her legacy as a television icon. But Reed wasn't done yet. After the series ended in 1966, she took an unexpected turn, briefly stepping into the high-stakes world of primetime drama by replacing Barbara Bel Geddes as Miss Ellie on Dallas. Though her tenure was short-lived, it was a testament to her ability to adapt. Shortly after, she retired from acting, leaving behind a dual legacy, one in film, the other on television, where she had not just performed but also shaped the landscape. Robert Young. Robert Young was a familiar face in Hollywood throughout the 1930s and 1940s, starring in films like The Enchanted Cottage and Crossfire. But despite his steady work, he never quite reached the towering stardom of his contemporaries. By the early 1950s, the golden age of Hollywood was shifting, and Young found himself at a crossroads. Then in 1954, everything changed. He stepped into the role of Jim Anderson in Father Knows Best, a wholesome family sitcom that would redefine his career. At first, the show struggled in its early run on radio, but when it transitioned to television, it became a cultural touchstone, running for 6 seasons and cementing Young as America's favorite TV dad. Unlike many film actors who saw television as a step down, Young embraced the small screen wholeheartedly, and he wasn't done yet. A decade later, he reinvented himself again in Marcus Welby, MD, playing a compassionate doctor in a groundbreaking medical drama. The show was a massive success, earning Young an Emmy and proving his ability to shift seamlessly between genres. While many of his peers clung to fading film careers, Young made television his home, thriving in a medium that gave him the lasting recognition Hollywood never fully did. Dick Powell. Dick Powell's career was a masterclass in reinvention. In the 1930s, he was the golden boy of musicals, crooning his way through Warner Brothers hits. But by the 1940s, he shattered that image, transforming into a hard-boiled film noir lead in classics like Murder, My Sweet. Then came the 1950s, and Powell pulled off his boldest pivot yet, television. But he didn't just step in front of the camera. He co-founded 4-Star Television, a powerhouse that launched countless shows and careers. His own series, Dick Powell's Zane Grey Theater, wasn't just another Western anthology. It became a breeding ground for future TV hits. Ever heard of The Rifleman or Wanted Dead or Alive? They got their start thanks to Powell's keen eye for talent. And speaking of talent, he gave a major break to a young Steve McQueen, setting the stage for one of Hollywood's biggest icons. Powell wasn't just adapting to television, he was shaping it. His influence didn't fade with time. 4-Star Television became a major force in the industry, proving that Powell's instincts were razor sharp. He wasn't just a star making the leap to TV, he was a mogul, redefining what was possible for film legends in the new era of entertainment. Gene Barry. Gene Barry had the looks, the charm, and the leading man presence that Hollywood craved in the golden age of cinema. He made a splash in films like The War of the Worlds in the early 1950s. But despite his undeniable screen presence, he struggled to secure a lasting place among the A-list elite. Then came television, his true stage. In 1958, Barry found his breakthrough role as the impeccably dressed, cane-wielding Bat Masterson, a Western lawman with a flair for fashion and finesse. The show was a hit, running for 3 seasons and solidifying Barry as a household name. But he didn't stop there. In the 60s, he shifted gears into detective drama with Burke's Law, where he played Amos Burke, a millionaire police captain who solved crimes with wit and sophistication. It was a perfect showcase for Barry's suave demeanor, and audiences loved it. Though he occasionally returned to film, television remained his true home, allowing him to carve out a unique niche as the stylish, charismatic lead. Ida Lupino. Ida Lupino wasn't just another Hollywood star making the jump to television. She was a full-fledged pioneer. In the 1940s, she lit up the silver screen with her commanding presence, but by the 1950s, she was breaking barriers behind the camera. At a time when directing was almost exclusively a man's game, Lupino carved out a space for herself, helming episodes of some of the era's most popular television shows. Her transition wasn't about fading relevance, it was about seizing new creative ground. She directed and acted in numerous TV series, proving her versatility in front of the camera and behind it. Audiences saw her chilling performance in The Twilight Zone, and her sharp storytelling in Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Her ability to shift between genres and roles showcased a rare adaptability that made her a sought-after force in television. But Lupino wasn't just directing. She was shaping the very language of TV storytelling, influencing generations of filmmakers who followed. Her work behind the scenes helped pave the way for women in television directing, a legacy that still resonates today. Unlike many Golden Age stars who moved to TV as a last resort, Lupino made the transition on her own terms, proving that reinvention wasn't just possible, it was necessary. George Burns and Gracie Allen. Before television reshaped entertainment, George Burns and Gracie Allen were already household names. They had conquered vaudeville, radio, and film, but in 1950, they took a gamble on a new medium, television. The George Burns and Gracie Allen Show became one of the earliest sitcom successes, running for 8 years and pioneering a format that would influence countless comedies. Burns, ever the showman, broke the fourth wall, speaking directly to the audience, a technique that was revolutionary at the time. Their chemistry was undeniable, with Gracie's signature ditzy charm perfectly complementing Burns' dry wit. But when Gracie retired in 1958, Burns faced a crossroads. Instead of fading away, he reinvented himself, continuing in television and later making a triumphant return to film. His persistence paid off, winning an Academy Award for The Sunshine Boys in 1975, proving that his comedic genius could transcend decades in mediums. Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda was Hollywood royalty, a man whose name was synonymous with prestige films like The Grapes of Wrath and 12 Angry Men. So when he made the leap to television in the late 1950s, it was nothing short of a shock. At the time, the small screen was seen as a step down for major film stars, a place for fading careers rather than active legends. But Fonda wasn't fading, he was evolving. In 1959, he took on The Deputy, a Western series where he played U.S. Marshal Simon Fry. However, Fonda wasn't about to give up his film career entirely. He negotiated a unique contract, appearing in only select episodes while leaving the bulk of the action to his co-star, Alan Case. This allowed him to maintain his stature in Hollywood while testing the waters of television. His approach was ahead of its time, a strategy later used by stars like Fred MacMurray on My Three Sons. The Deputy only lasted 2 seasons, but it proved that even the most revered film actors could find success on TV without sacrificing their big-screen careers. Fonda's gamble paid off, setting a precedent for other Golden Age icons to follow. George Raft. George Raft was the epitome of the Hollywood tough guy, a man who didn't just play gangsters, he lived among them. In the 1930s and 1940s, he was a box-office powerhouse, bringing an effortless swagger to films like Scarface and Each Dawn I Die. But by the 1950s, the roles dried up. The suave bad boy of the silver screen was aging out of Hollywood's leading man mold, and he needed a new angle. Enter I'm the Law, a television gamble that didn't quite pay off. In 1953, Raft stepped into the role of New York detective George Kirby, a no-nonsense crime fighter cleaning up the streets. It was a stark contrast to the mobsters he once embodied, almost as if he was trying to rewrite his own cinematic legacy. But audiences weren't buying it. The show lacked the grit and tension of the crime dramas that would later dominate television, and after just 1 season, I'm the Law was history. Still, Raft wasn't ready to fade into obscurity. He made sporadic guest appearances throughout the 1960s, popping up in shows like Batman and The Red Skelton Hour, keeping his name in the public eye. Yet despite these efforts, he never recaptured his former glory. Unlike some of his contemporaries who found second lives on television, Raft's transition felt more like a last-ditch effort than a reinvention. His legacy remained firmly rooted in the gangster films that made him a star, proving that sometimes an actor's past is too iconic to escape. Ann Sothern. Ann Sothern was Hollywood's golden girl in the 1930s and 1940s, lighting up the screen with her quick wit and effortless charm. She became a household name with the Maisie film series, playing a street-smart showgirl who always found herself in the middle of some wild adventure. But by the early 1950s, the studio system was crumbling, and big-screen roles were drying up. Rather than fade into obscurity, Southern made a bold move. She took her comedic talents to television. In 1953, she starred in Private Secretary, a sitcom where she played the sharp and efficient Susie McNamara. The show was a hit, earning her 3 Emmy nominations and proving that she had just as much star power on the small screen as she did in theaters. Southern wasn't done yet. When Private Secretary ended, she jumped right into The Ann Southern Show in 1958, playing the manager of an upscale hotel. Once again, audiences loved her, and the series ran for 3 successful seasons. Her transition to television wasn't just a career move, it was a reinvention. She adapted to the changing entertainment landscape, proving that talent and charisma could outlast the rigid studio system. And while she eventually returned to film in later years, even earning an Academy Award nomination for The Whales of August in the 1980s, it was television that gave her a second act when Hollywood was ready to move on. Robert Cummings. Robert Cummings was the picture-perfect romantic lead of the 1940s, charming audiences in films like Saboteur and Dial M for Murder. But as the golden age of Hollywood began to shift, so did Cummings. In 1955, he made a bold move, stepping into the world of television with The Bob Cummings Show. Here he played a suave photographer navigating love and comedy, a role that felt tailor-made for his effortless charm. The gamble paid off. The show was a hit, running for 5 seasons and even earning him an Emmy nomination. But Cummings wasn't done with television just yet. In 1961, he returned with The New Bob Cummings Show, though lightning didn't strike twice, and the series lasted only 1 season. Still, his transition from leading man to sitcom staple proved that charisma doesn't fade, it just finds a new stage. Joan Blondell. Joan Blondell was the kind of actress who could steal a scene with just a raised eyebrow and a perfectly timed wisecrack. In the 1930s, she was one of Warner Brothers' most reliable stars, lighting up musicals and comedies with her quick wit and undeniable charm. But by the 1950s, Hollywood had changed, and film roles became scarce. Instead of fading away, Blondell did what so many of her era struggled to do. She pivoted. Television became her new stage, and she embraced it with the same energy that made her a star in the first place. Her first major TV role came in The Real McCoys, where she played the feisty Aunt Wynn, proving she could still command attention even in a supporting role. Then came Here Come the Brides, a late 60s series where she played Lottie, the tough yet warm-hearted saloon owner. The show was a hit, and Blondell's presence gave it a touch of old Hollywood magic. But she didn't stop there. She popped up in everything from The Twilight Zone to Bonanza, showing off her range and reminding audiences why she had been a star in the first place. Her move to television wasn't just about staying relevant, it was about keeping the work coming. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Blondell never seemed bitter about the transition. She adapted, evolved, and kept on delivering performances that were as sharp and engaging as ever. Even as the golden age of Hollywood faded, Joan Blondell made sure her light never dimmed. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.